Hey everyone, it's Andrzej on Software, and today I'm very happy because yesterday we successfully reactivated the Drag meetup. Just to calm you down, Drag is not about drugs. Drag is a shortcut for the full name as Dolnośląski Ruby User Group, so it's a local Ruby user group. It's a user meetup, Ruby user group with a long tradition. It's more than 10 years or maybe even 11 years. In the last year we've had a 1 year long break, or maybe less than 1 year, but there were no meetups, and it's really cool that we are back and fully active. The talks last night there were 3 talks. One was by Kamil Łasocha Rafał Łasocha from Arkansas about subject-oriented programming, and I think this talk was really in the best spirit of Drag, so find some really science fiction stuff in computer science related to Ruby in some way and talk about it. So that was really, for me, it was very inspiring because subject-oriented programming was a foundation for multi-dimensional separation of concerns, a topic that I was very much into, and both those topics evolved later into aspect-oriented programming. I think it's a technique, it's a paradigm which is still, I would say, undervalued overall in the programming communities, but can bring us a lot of good things, hopefully, in the future. So it was nice to see Rafał exploring these areas too, and this got me inspired. And today I even created a new repository where I hope to bring some kind of multi-dimensional separation of concerns into Ruby. By being inspired by HyperJ, so the Java implementation of multidimensional separation of concerns. That's a really long name. Anyway, the second talk was also a really cool talk. That was by what's the name? Kasia. Anyway, that was a talk about a story how she went to programming by starting with having a PhD in Polish literature. And it was not directed to the newbie programmers. It was more directed, at least that's my impression, it was more directed to people who are already in programming, but they're often asked by some potential programmers how they can start, right? So there were good resources provided, good and funny stories. The funny story was about debugging situation where a Ruby method array.include was called with a question mark, but the question mark was put after the last bracket. So that was natural for a person coming from the literature background, but it's not the way Ruby works. So a funny, entertaining, and very educational talk. I will have a talk kind of similar to that one next week, where I want to introduce teachers to programming a little bit. So the resources provided will definitely help me. And the last talk was from Jan Dudek, and it was about using Lambda Edge for deploying front-end applications and some really cool tricks how to run some JavaScript code just before the request is back to the user. Both very deep, I would say. It was nicely touching the topic of Lambda, which I'm really interested in. I try to at least follow what is going on. I think Lambda is kind of the future, but I'm not really good at the details here. So it was good to see at least one side of the production stories. And overall, I think Janek implemented a really cool technique how to deal with deploying front ends, dealing with deploying several versions, and being sure that all is good. So first delivering one version to only part of the group of the users and so on. So really cool stuff. I think from what I understand, Twitter does it very similarly. So there were 3 talks. There was quite a big number of people, and I think the pub was really nice to have a good new venue that we now have there. It could be more space, but I think with this kind of situation, it was also really cool. It was really nice to see the old faces, I would say, but also there were many new faces and people I didn't know about who were commenting from during the talks, and that's the part that I really like about Drag, that we encourage discussions during the talks. That was so. Drag is more about a discussion club, I would say, than about talks. So the speaker's role is, I think, to trigger discussions more than deliver some really, really deep stuff. So That's the point. And also usually after the drag, back in the years ago, we usually stayed for some beers and then talking. And yesterday it was the same. We 6 or 7 people stayed. We've had some really good discussions. We've had some discussions about Cucumber with some really nice arguments. Overall, I'm not a fan of Cucumber, but the examples provided by I don't remember the name, but someone gave some good examples of where Cucumber makes sense for them. We obviously had the mandatory battle between Minitest and RSpec, and obviously Minitest won the battle. And we also discussed static typing and other mandatory things like code editors and so on. The usual conversations that you would have at a programming meetup. And obviously we ended up, as the Goldwyn law for programmers says, over time, a conversation between programmers sooner or later ends with JavaScript. So that's where we ended, I think. So great to see the drag being back. It's always the third Monday of the month, and I think we have good energy now to keep the tradition going. So the next time drag will be in Wrocław is 21st of May at 7 p.m. This third Monday of every month at 7 p.m. was our API that I think has never changed over the 10 years. So that's a good stable API from our side. And thanks for listening, and maybe see you at the next drag.